Hello again guys. In today's video I'm going to run you through a beginner's tutorial on how to create this pear using colour pencils. Now we could create this piece using only 7 colours and we'll be blending it out with some odorless mineral spirits. I'm going to be using my Polychromos pencils today because I think they're a little easier to control, but if you have some prismacolor pencils and you'd like to use those, I've listed some alternative colours for that. You'll get pretty much the same result. Now, you'll need a nice sturdy paper for this project. I like to use the Fabriano Academia paper, but there are plenty of other alternatives that you can use and I'll list some of those down in the description. Whichever paper you choose, make sure that it's a nice sturdy paper with a little bit of weight and something with a little bit of tooth so that the paper will take the layers of pencil that we're going to add to it. Down in the description I've added a link to my website where I've uploaded the reference picture that I used for this. Now I've chosen this pear because it's a pretty easy shape to draw. It doesn't really matter if you get the shapes right or not, but if you're really not confident with your drawing skills, I've also added a really easy line drawing so that you can just trace over that and get to work and start practicing the colouring straight away. The first thing I always do is to protect my highlights with my white pencil. Now I've got this little area of the pear here that I just want to stay brighter than the rest. So I'm going to take a nice sharp pencil and holding it further down the barrel, so I'm not pressing too hard, I'm just going to add a little layer of white to the places that I don't want to let get dark. My next step is to take my light green pencil and I'm going to add a base coat over the whole surface of the pear. I'm going to hold the pencil nice and far down the barrel so that I'm not pressing too hard, and I've got a really nice sharp tip on this pencil. And I'm just going to do some little circles over the whole pear except for that highlighted area. As I wear down the tip of the pencil, I'm just going to continually roll it so that I constantly have a little bit of a sharp edge there. I really don't want it to get too blunt at this point at all. And I'm going to continue doing this until I have a nice light layer over the entire pear. Okay, so we've got the base layer down and as you can see it's still pretty sketchy. We can still see a lot of the white of the paper through the pencil, but don't be discouraged by that because this is only the first layer and the thinners are really going to help us work that pencil down into the paper. Okay, so my next step is to map out my shadows using my darker green pencil. Now looking at my reference photo I can see that the majority of the shadows are along the base of the pear and down on this right hand side. So I'm going to get to work plotting these out and getting my ideas in, and it's really going to help bring the shape of the pear to life. It's very important to look carefully at your reference photo while doing this part. These shadow areas create the three-dimensional look to the pear. This isn't a perfectly round fruit. It's a little bit bulgy and lumpy, and the shadows reflect that. If you have trouble seeing the subtle value changes in a reference picture, sometimes it can be easier to use your phone or computer to change the image to black and white, and this will make those subtle shadows so much easier to see. I'm using the same technique as I did with the light green, just working in little circles as I layer on top of that lighter green colour. My next step is going to be to add in my blemishes, any really obvious blemishes, and the browns along the top. So I can see from my reference photo that I've got a major sort of blemish here, a major blemish here, one down on the side here. Putting these in now will just mean that they can be blended out and sort of softened into the whole piece, and it means that I've got my little road maps in for myself later. Now that I've got my picture fairly well mapped out on my paper, I'm going to start using the thinners to push the pigment down into the paper and start making the whole image a lot more solid. I'm going to take a soft paintbrush and I'm going to dip it into my thinners and I'm going to wipe it off on the side, and then I'm going to use this little scrap piece of paper to take even more of that thinners off the brush. We really don't need very much at all. And then I'm going to start using the same sort of technique as I did with the pencil, just little tiny circles. Start pushing the pigment down into the paper. Okay, so now we've got a nice coverage to our paper and it's got a really nice soft sort of watercolour effect. But we can get this a lot more vibrant with more layers. But we do have to wait for those thinners to be absolutely dry before we add any more pencil, because otherwise we risk damaging the tooth of our paper. So while I wait for this to dry, I'm going to add the shadow underneath the pear and the shadow on the stem. This is really the darkest area of the painting, so I can be pretty confident going in really dark with this pencil. When I get to the lighter area of shadow, I use my lighter grey pencil and only use a feather light touch just to add the hint of pencil to the paper. And I try not to make too much of a defined edge on that shadow, just letting it softly fade into the white of the paper. Then I blend this shadow using the thinners, being careful not to spread that dark area out too far. Okay, so now that my thinners are dried, I'm going to add another layer of my greens. Same as before, but I'm just going to make everything a lot more bold and a lot more solid. Just very lightly, once again, holding far down from the tip, just adding another layer of colour. This time I can work a little bit into my highlight and just sort of take away that harsh edge. I don't want that to be completely separate, so I'm just going to work into that a little bit. The white we put down at that first step is going to protect that area from getting too dark. So we're just going to go over the whole thing again with our light green and then go back and deepen our shadows with the dark green. Okay, now that I've got another couple of layers down, I'm going to blend this out again, but this time I have to be incredibly careful that I'm using a very, very dry brush. Once you've got a couple of layers down, if you have too much thinner on your paintbrush, what's going to happen is you're going to start lifting and moving the pencil around instead of blending it together. As you can see right there, I'm taking more pencil away than I'm actually blending together, and that's the opposite of what I want to do. So before I touch my piece, I'm going to dry my brush off on this spare piece of paper as much as I can. I only need the barest hint of thinner on this brush to blend it now. And I'm going to make the same motion again as I did the first time. Just barely touching the paper. And it'll give a nice solid effect. And it'll build up just another layer of colour. This time I can work over that white, blending in the edges so that it's not quite so harsh. We don't want that to be separate from the rest of the piece. It's a highlight, not a separate area. And if there are any areas that I think I've covered up too much, I can take a little bit of that thinner and use that same ability to lift off, just like that. Very dry brush. Now while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to work on this stem. I'm going to use my lighter brown colour on this area where the light is coming towards. And I'm going to work in the direction of the texture of the stem. When I'm happy with the coverage that I've got, I blend the colours very slightly, and then I go back over with my darkest colours to add just a little bit more texture and to deepen the shadow where the stem meets the fruit. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with the coverage of the paper right now, so I'm going to start working on some of the blemishes around the whole pear. Now, in these darker areas, I can make these spots darker, and in the lighter areas, I'm only going to press very lightly. We need to try and keep these looking as random as possible, which is a kind of a tricky thing to do. It's very easy to sort of make very even patterns as we work. And now that we've got a few spots down, I'm going to go around each of those spots with a little halo of the darker green. Only pressing very lightly. When I have all of these imperfections in place, I go over my piece once again, making sure that I'm happy with my shadows and making adjustments where I feel they're needed. Then I use a super dry brush and a feather-light touch to very softly blend those top layers together. This just softens the look of those blemishes from looking too polka dotty on the surface of the pear and brings the whole piece together. It's a good idea at this point to step back from your drawing often. Maybe place it a distance away from you, or take a photo with your phone, or just get up and have a cuppa before you look at it again. This can really help you view your piece objectively and help you decide if there are any more adjustments that need to be made. These last little tweaks can make all the difference. So there you have it. With an afternoon's work, we've got a simple colour pencil pear that's been completed using only 7 pencils. If you're interested in learning how to use colour pencils, a simple project like this is a great way to learn. You don't need to go out and buy a huge set of pencils, and this simple shape means that you can just get in and start practicing the colouring in techniques without worrying about ruining a complicated drawing that you've worked for hours on. I hope you give this a go. If you do, please show me by tagging me on Instagram. I'd love to see your work. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'd really like to keep making some basic step-by-step tutorials like this, so if you have any ideas for things that you would like to learn, please leave me a comment and I'll put it down in my big book of ideas. Hit that subscribe button to see more of my work, and thank you so much for watching.